because this even structural reform has turned into such a cliche in our discourse. I mean, everybody talks about that. Everybody pays lip service. Be it the government, the military, the international lenders, and yet very little of that is on the horizon or even likely to. And I'm really worried, because I feel that these terms are appropriated, Danish, that structural reform from a capitalist neoliberal perspective would mean different from a progressive people centered version, right? So privatization is now being argued as this panacea that you and of course the state owned enterprises can't keep on making losses, but I'm not so sure if privatization, just chalk block privatization, is the solution. But anyway, I don't want to digress. Now, let us also examine the price of dollar in Pakistan has
Mm.
also been rising. I mean, now in the open market, it has crossed 300 rupees level. I think it was selling for 330 rupees or so in the open market. And the of course, one of the conditions of the IMF program is to bring the rate of dollar close to its market rate, based on the demand and supply and push and pull factors. Now that obviously has a direct bearing on inflation. So on
Mhm.
the one hand, electricity prices, which are going to fuel inflation, and then you have the price of dollar, which is also going to do that. So I mean, what do you see in the short term? Don't you think the inflation problem might become really unmanageable?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, these are all issues tied together. So, because the previous government, the PDM government, was very aggressive on import contractions, right? And then through multiple administrative measures, for instance, not allowing LCs and so forth. So that reduced the demand of imports, which relieved some pressure on dollar, right? So that's why we felt. Now, since the new government, the caretaker government, has come up, and one of the requirements of IMF program is to not do import contraction, right? So therefore, now there are less restrictions on LC, which has led to uh, rupee depreciating, right? But that's the whole point, as you said, about this framework. And it might sound silly and ridiculous, but that's how it is. To be the It's not unintended consequence. The whole point of this policy is that rupee gets depreciated and things become more expensive, imports become more expensive, and therefore we assume that people will demand less imports.
Ah,
Assume that's the goal. Just like in the US, Fed is pushing interest rate up to make homes unaffordable for the majority. That's not the unintended consequences. That is the goal, to slow down economy, to create unemployment. Similarly, in Pakistan, State Bank is raising interest rate. They want to slow down economy. They want to make imports expensive so people demand less imports. But if when there are no domestic substitutes for imports, right? So we are just hoping that imports would decline. Of course, they will decline a little bit, but if they're essential, right, there will be a massive uh, spillover effect over all economy in terms of high inflation. So this floating currency exchange rate, and again, this leads to a lot of inflation in Pakistan. And this, uh, unless I think there's administrative measures are needed in the short run, such as limiting LCs, but a more sustainable solution is to a maybe remittances can improve, and also exports. And the most, and what I feel the government is counting on, or the state, is the foreign direct investments from the Gulf states. And that's the big bet they are making, that huge inflows would come in terms of agriculture, ports and minerals and all. You have heard all of that. That will ease off the pressure on dollar. That's the big bet. Other than that, I don't see any way out of this crisis in the short run.
and what do you think are going to be? I mean, I think it's going to have a serious political fallout. Because at the moment we have a caretaker government, we are heading towards a new election. The establishment is fully in control of Pakistan's politics and everything. And I think this is going to put pressure on the establishment as well. I mean, and by that, for the viewers, those who may not know, Pakistan is a military establishment we're talking about. So, what do you think Danish is going to? Because obviously, it is going to complicate that side of governance as well.
I mean, one thing it has exposed, I mean, past few weeks, that the whole discourse about politicians being unable to govern well, right? And we need a technocratic setup, right? Which assumes that technocrats can take really difficult economic steps and things would turn around great, right? While without, there's a famous, I mean, if you look at any reform process, the stability is key. You cannot just put a huge exogenous shock on the society which can disrupt the social fabric and assume that reforms would lead to any positive change. And that's what issue with the technocratic governments, because they seem to be less responsive, right, to electorate, and therefore uh, they have raised electricity rates at a more aggressive pace. Also, I think in
Fuel
terms of uh,
prices.
yeah, other food inflation, they seem to be less reluctant, right? So to control that, because they leave everything on market, and that has created that a major contradiction in the society, where now average working and middle classes beyond party lines, right, beyond party lines, they are more in the streets and want some sort of economic relief. So unless unless government provides a temporary relief to working and middle classes, the big plans of turning around economy through foreign direct investments would not bear much fruit, right? Because you must maintain minimum social stability in the system.